The Archangel Chronicles by Raymond. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 21, The Balapan. I am Abubakar. Listen to me, scribe, and write this all down, for this is my story. I made my choice. I knew, deep in my heart, that this eagle and I were bonded with invisible threads that are impossible to describe. When I looked into her eyes, I knew that the great bird's spirit was to be part of my destiny, whatever that would be. That night, I chose to go to the clan of the Eagles. I looked to my Kyrios, Adam. He nodded to me as I made my choice, tears welling up in his eyes. Zephros' handler, the elder named Aduthuma, placed his hand on my shoulder and drew me closer to him. I now knew enough of the Scythian tongue to understand his simple command. Come. Wait, said Adam. He came and embraced me, clutching me tightly to his chest. Abu, he whispered, you are like a son to me. You have learned so much, but now you must go and be with the eagles. You will see far and discern much that is hidden from the minds of humankind. Be well, my boy. Learn, search, find. Come back to us when you are ready. I will wait for you. Gently, he kissed the top of my head. I tightened my embrace, hugging Kyrios with all my strength. Kyrios, I said, I'm afraid to leave you. If you command it, I would gladly stay and serve you alone. No, my boy, you are no longer my apprentice, nor is it your destiny to serve just me. Raphael has told me so. You must go. With that, we parted. We left the tent of the great hall. I last saw my Kyrios framed against the opening, backlit by the fire and torches within. Out into the vast grasslands of the steppes, I followed Aduthuma. Zephros, her head hooded with a leather cap, was ever present, perched on his right arm. We mounted our steppe horses. They had been made ready for the journey. We had additional pack horses carrying our supplies and tents. The night was moonless, but starlight shining from the vast vaulted sky lit the way. We traveled for many days, climbing the foothills higher and higher above the plains and the river valley below. The air grew colder. The night was filled with the sound of the wind, and faintly in the distance, the howling of wolves. "Wolves," said Aduthuma. "Soon we hunt, then you learn." Many weeks out from the Scythian camp, we climbed a tall, steep-sided plateau, leading our horses along a stony path. The summit of this mountain was topped with a ring of jagged stones, like crooked teeth. I shivered at the thought. Aduthuma, with his red, weather-beaten face and long white beard, said barely a word during the trip to this place. He stopped, looked over his shoulder at me, and smiled. He nodded his head. "Home," was all he said. My training began early the next morning. The golden orb of Ra, the sun god, spread his warming rays over the mists in the valley far below. The steps were clothed in a ragged, ghostly cloak of fog, and the wind began to stir its tattered edges. Zephros was on her perch, the T-shaped staff on which Aduthuma had carried her for the last 5 days. The staff was affixed to its stand at the very top of one of the boulders surrounding the small stone hut that Aduthuma called home. The great bird sat there serenely, hooded but majestic. Aduthuma was a man of few words, but when he did speak, I listened, for what he had to say was important. He brought me into the presence of the eagle, while she sat on her perch, hooded and docile. The great bird's power and grace radiated from her. In a swift, gentle movement, he swept the leather cap from her head. The eyes of the great bird came alive. She turned her head, scanning the skies and then the valley below. "Look, boy, at this gift from heaven. She is the queen of the sky and far-seeing. See her talons and how strong they are. They are her weapons. With these weapons, she will break the spine of her prey. We must keep good care of them. See her wings. They are full and well-proportioned. See her feathers, how they bristle on her head." The eagle locked eyes with me, sending a shock down my spine. "She has hunted 1,000 wolves," Aduthuma continued, "and she protects my flocks." Aduthuma presented me with a gauntlet, a long glove made of thick cowhide, extending up to my shoulder. "You will learn the noble gestures, then the bird will respect you as its equal. You must always respect the bird. The noble gestures are the call to bring her back to you, the movement of your carrying arm, the support you must give her as she rests upon your arm. Then there is the way you hold the strap at her feet, and sensing when to remove the hood and release the leather tracings held in your gloved hand at exactly the right time. I tell you, boy, hunting with the eagle is a noble adventure. The mutual respect between you and her is a gift from heaven." The eagle never stopped scanning the distance with those magnificent, piercing brown eyes. I felt a tingling, a shock, like being immersed in cold water. Fully alive and fully awake, she locked eyes with me again, and I felt as if I could see through them into the distance, like I were in a high place. Zephros cried out in joy. Aduthuma put the hood back on the eagle's head. The spell was broken. I found myself with my feet back on the ground, and Aduthuma looking at me intently. "I think, boy, you have a gift. You see through the eye of the eagle. This is rare and precious beyond belief. You will take this bird from me before long, and bring her back to the sacred heights, to return her to where she will be free." "But why must I do that, Master? She is beautiful, and I see that she loves you. Can she not stay with us?" Aduthuma placed his hand on my shoulder. "Listen to me, boy. We do not possess such sacred creatures. They do not belong to us. They are gifts that we may use for a time, but we must honor our love for them by letting them free when the time comes." He looked at Zephros, now perched on my arm, and lovingly stroked her head and neck. He had tears in his eyes. "She has been my companion for 7 years. We have hunted and prospered together. Very soon we must take her to the sacred mountain, where we will release her to the deep blue sky. There she will find a mate. Then the cycle will begin again. I must honor her service to me by letting her go. She has told me this, and I must obey." Aduthuma looked to the sky, arms widespread, and sang his mournful prayer. "She has dispelled the darkness from my heart. She has brought light into my house. She has taught me to see and understand the flight of birds in the heavens." He finished and looked at me. "And you, boy, will come with me up to the sacred mountains, where the eagles nest. We will find a Balapan, a young eagle that has not yet flown, but ready to fledge. You will train it. I will show you, and the eagle will become the light in your life, and more you will see." My education as a friend of the eagles continued all through the rest of the autumn, and through the howling winds, the ice and the snows of the deep winter. I was not used to the piercing cold, and at night huddled, covered by animal skins and furs, curled up close to the hearth of Aduthuma's well-kept fire. One day we had visitors. A man and his 3 sons came up from the valley. They brought an eagle with them, perched on the father's arm, propped up by a T-shaped stick while he rode his horse. The eagle's body was almost the length of the man's torso, but I had learned from Zephros that for all their size, eagles were surprisingly light. I could see that, even hooded, this eagle was in much distress. She couldn't sit still on her perch. She screamed and flapped her enormous wings, batting her handler on the head and shoulders, almost knocking him off his horse 2 or 3 times as they approached Aduthuma's hut on the top of the mountain. When they stopped and dismounted, the eagle's behavior intensified. She flapped her wings, knocking her handler's hat off its head. She screamed incessantly. Aduthuma never took his eyes off the bird. He approached it and took up the traces, transferring it to his own gloved arm, smoothing and gently caressing its head and neck feathers. He whispered to it. The bird calmed down and sat quietly on his arm. Slowly, he removed its hood. Those incredible eyes saw Aduthuma's face, and it grew silent. Then it turned to its owner and his sons, and instantly resumed its agitation, screaming fierce and angry cries, flapping its wings and attempting to fly at them. It took all of Aduthuma's strength to hold it back. He whispered to it and slowly, patiently, put the hood back on the eagle's head. It quieted down again. Aduthuma put the eagle on a perch and took its owner and his sons inside his hut, where there was a fire in the hearth. He prepared tea for his guests. "Master Aduthuma, You are wise in the lore of the Windmasters. Tell me what is wrong with my eagle. Aduthuma, squatting by the fire, stirred the coals. Dogak, he said, you know nothing. You have ruined this gift from the sky. Dogak was offended by the accusation. What do you mean? I followed your instructions. What have I done wrong? You have not read the bird's spirit, you fool, came Aduthuma's reply, spoken softly, his eyes blazing at Dogak. She is not your bird, your possession, my friend. She has imprinted on you as the source of food, not as her soulmate. She screams at you because she has learned that you are to be attacked and beaten by her wings when she is hungry until she is fed. What is to be done? Sighed Dogak. It is too late. You must let her go where she will find peace. You must start over again with the proper mindset and the noble gestures. Start over? But I have no time. Aduthuma sat for a long time staring into the fire. Dogak, hear me. You will never be a friend of the eagles. My advice is to find a lesser bird to train, a pigeon perhaps. Maybe then you will come to know their heart. Leave the bird with me. I will take her back to the sacred mountains and set her free among the winds. I learned to be calm in the presence of Zephros. I learned to look at her sideways, never directly in the eye, until weeks went by and she was used to my presence. I sensed the wild, majestic spirit within her. I learned to feed her by hand, and she began to trust me. Aduthuma taught me to take her on my arm for short walks at first, and then ever longer in duration. After a time, working with her for days on end, she was very relaxed in my presence. I was able to remove her hood, and knew instantly that she knew me and began to preen herself in my presence. Over many days and weeks, I could take her further and further afield. I was gradually able to ride a horse with her perched on my arm, which was propped up by a padded stick. One day, Aduthuma came to me while I was with her. It is time, was all he said. We packed up for a long journey to the sacred mountain, high above the plains overlooking the river, snaking through the valley far below. Zephros was perched on my arm. I was mounted beside Aduthuma, his keen eyes scanning the landscape far below. He stopped and held up his hand. Orcs, he said quietly and pointed. I followed his gesture and squinted to see better in the biting wind, which filled my eyes with tears. I saw movement on the plain far below. A dozen wolves were running in a pack along the river. Zephros, orcs, fly now, said Aduthuma. He nodded to me. In one smooth movement, I used one of the noble gestures to remove the hood from Zephros' head, dropped the leather traces from her legs, and showed her the prey. Immediately, she locked her sharp eyes on the moving wolves far below. I flung her gently into the air. She flapped her massive wings 2 or 3 times, climbing quickly. Then she soared into the air, caught an updraft, and circled around, crying majestically. The sound echoed off the mountains and filled the valley below. Far down below, the wolves paused. They were looking for the source of the sound, but couldn't see it. Zephros was now diving swiftly down the mountain slope, honing in on the lead wolf. She cried again as she rapidly closed the distance. I closed my eyes and caught my breath. I began to see through the eagle's eyes as she whistled through the air, faster and faster towards the lead wolf. The wolf stood transfixed, unable to move, still searching the sky but not seeing the eagle. Zephros flashed down the slope. The wolf finally caught sight of her and fixed its wild eyes on her. Zephros gave another cry. She flared her wings, bleeding off speed, and stretched out her talons as she drew close to the wolf. At the last possible second, the wolf bolted to the left, causing Zephros to miss. She hit the ground, bounded twice, and then sprang up high into the air, her great wings pumping. She rose and caught another updraft and circled high over the plain. The rest of the wolf pack, startled at the eagle's attack, scattered in all directions. I saw through the eagle's eyes and sensed her ferocious concentration as she began another attack, honing in again on the great wolf leader. The alpha wolf was now bounding in great loops over the plain, desperately trying to evade the spirit from the sky. Left he lurched, then right, then stopping and reversing directions. But I could see Zephros changing the angle of her attack, shifting in accordance with the movements of her prey. The wolf was tiring. He looked back over his shoulders, eyes blazing, tongue hanging limply out of its open jaws. Zephros swooped in for another attack. The rushing wind brushed the eagle's feathers, whistling louder and louder as she closed in. The wolf, now realizing he could no longer outrun his pursuer, suddenly stopped, turned about to face her, chest heaving, mouth open, teeth flashing in a snarl. Zephros was on the wolf, screaming, folding her wings back, talons outstretched. She caught the wolf, hitting him like a missile, and the momentum of the attack knocked the beast completely over. The great eagle and her prey swirled about in a cloud of dust, wings and fur. Suddenly, all was still. Aduthuma and I galloped down the slope in pursuit. When the dust cleared and we jumped off our horses, the great bird stood on top of the wolf, her talons closed on its throat, snapping the wolf's neck and killing it instantly. Zephros raised her head to the sky and issued a loud scream in triumph. Aduthuma coaxed the great bird back onto its perch on my arm. With a sharp knife, he cut off a strip of raw flesh from the wolf's paw and placed it in the grip of my gauntleted hand. Zephros feasted as she perched on my arm, her talons gently grasping the rawhide gloved arm with restrained power. She tore away at the raw meat hungrily. Aduthuma threw the carcass of the wolf, with its fine pelt that would keep him and his family warm for many days to come, over the horse's back and climbed back into the saddle. "The great sky god has blessed us this day," he said. "The great wolf has given up its spirit. For this we must be thankful." We camped that night, high on the ridge, in the shelter of a rocky outcrop. The stars danced their eternal celestial celebration in the dark moonless sky. In the distance, in the valley far below, the mournful howls of the wolf pack echoed back across the endless plains and hills. No doubt they were lamenting the loss of their leader and singing its spirit up to the stars. Zephros was perched on her T-shaped stick. She sat calm and hooded, illuminated in a scarlet hue by the flickering light of the fire. Aduthuma sat impassive by the fire. He grew pensive. "She has been a gift from the gods to me and my family," he said. "Hunting with an eagle is like writing a poem filled with meaning and beauty. I sang out the names of my ancestral heroes many times as she struck down her prey. I found Zephros when she was an Eales, a mere chick a downy bird unable to fly. I took her back to my home and fed her, and she became used to me, my children and my flocks. She was afraid of us at first, but we spent much time together. I wanted her to remain pure and wild. I tell her that she is the queen of the birds, and showed her that she can eat with me with no fear. Here, he said, gesturing to the wild country below us, the eagle is sacred. We have entered her kingdom, for she and her kin rule their territories and are prepared to die for it. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with tears. Life with an eagle is beautiful, like being with a child. I have never left Zephros for 7 years. I tell you, boy, a creature such as this brings light to the heart of humankind. He turned to the eagle, hooded and perched peacefully near him. You have been my loving companion for 7 years. We have shared good and bad times together. Because of your courage, my family and herds have prospered. But in the morning, we must set you free. You will go to the sky and find your mate, and one day you may give us a gift of one of your Balapans and give light again to our lives. The day dawned under steel-gray clouds. The plains below were shrouded in thick blankets of mist. Aduthuma took Zephros from her perch and, pulling on her traces, moved the great bird onto his gloved arm. With a sharp knife, he cut the traces. He removed the bells attached to her feet and lifted the hood off her head. Zephros locked eyes with Aduthuma. I could see him through her eyes and felt in her spirit what seemed like a hint of sadness, as if she knew what was coming. Fly away, mother. Fly to your heart's desire. He flung the great bird into the air. With several powerful beats of her great wings, she vaulted high into the endless sky. Her cries trailed off as she circled 3 times, climbing ever higher. And then she was gone, fading away into the mists. Aduthuma turned to me. Now we will search for your Balapan, boy. You will train her and love her, and she will hunt with you and protect your flocks. And 7 years from now, you will set her free and feel the loss as I have, and you will be thankful. And so it came to pass, weeks later, that Aduthuma and I came to another mountain. It was bitter cold. The mountains at this altitude were covered in snow. The north wind blew hard with driven sleet, stinging my face. I had never known such cold as this. It pierced me like a dagger. We wrapped ourselves in layers of fox and wolf skins, and wore deerskin boots lined with lamb's wool, and great coats that kept out the freezing rains and snow. We had been climbing into the high country for days. At the edge of a sheer cliff, we stopped our horses and dismounted. Aduthuma pointed to a spot halfway up the cliff face. There, boy. Take this rope and this sack. You will find an eyrie in that opening atop the cliffs. See the sticks and grass there. You will find your Balapan. Take care. It cannot yet fly, but her wings are powerful. Watch that you are not knocked off the cliff. You must talk to this bird. You must bring her back. I took the rope and held an end between my clenched teeth and slowly scaled the rock face, searching for footholds and handholds, I inched higher and higher. After a long, exhausting climb, my head at last drew level with the eagle's eyrie. The goddess of fortune, Tyche, was with me. The mother eagle was away, probably to find food for her fledgling. There in the nest, peering at me intently, was an Eales, a downy-covered young eagle who has not yet flown, staring at me. Our eyes locked. She opened her beak wide and let go a series of piercing cries. Cautiously, moving slowly, I mounted the ledge and tied the rope to a projecting branch. I pulled out the leather bag and, carefully avoiding the Eales's sharp beak and developing talons, seized her by the wings and pinned them to her body. I put a small hood over her head and gently folded her into the bag, which I then bound with the string. I pulled up the attached end of the rope and tied it to the bag. The eaglet struggled within, issuing a series of muffled cries. Calling down to Aduthuma far below, I carefully lowered the precious package into his waiting arms. "Well done, boy. Now watch you don't break your neck on the way down, or you will never train this bird." Seizing the rope, I rappelled down the cliff face much faster than I had come up. By the time I got to the foot of the cliff, Aduthuma had opened up the sack, and the eagle's head, beak open threateningly, snapped at unwary fingers and surveyed her new captors. Aduthuma closely bound the bird's developing wings and talons and wrapped her in lamb's wool and placed her gently into the sack. Then he placed this inside the breast of my greatcoat so that the warmth of my body would protect the eaglet from the biting cold and wind. We mounted our horses and returned down the slope. For 2 days, while riding back to Aduthuma's camp, the eaglet stayed close to my heart, drawing strength from the warmth of my body. I fed her strips of raw meat. The time spent with my eagle was intense. She was with me day and night. She imprinted on me and I with her. For 3 months, all through the winter, while she grew feathers and then turned from an awkward-looking creature into a well-proportioned and handsome juvenile, Aduthuma freed me to provide unswerving dedication to her training. She was never left alone and grew accustomed to the company of men. She was never left out of my eyesight. She was never allowed to become truly hungry, so that she would not think that the arrival of food would be associated with the presence of humans. She learned to feed from my gloved hand. She was kept in the presence of livestock, goats and lambs, so that she would not think of them as prey. She went for short flights on a leash and learned to come back to my gloved hand on call. Aduthuma came to me one day. "Boy, it is now time for you to name this bird." "Zephria," I said. It was as if the eagle had whispered that name in my ear. I love that bird as fiercely as I have ever loved any creature or person in my life. I could feel her emotions. I could see through her eyes as she flew further and further on her training flights, away from me, and then at a call, back to my outstretched arm, where she was rewarded with a strip of flesh. I trusted her, and she trusted me. Aduthuma took us hunting, first for hares and other small creatures of the plains, then foxes, and finally wolves. Zephira never missed a strike. Her aim and sight were true, and her flight was swift. Spring gave way to the summer, and summer to fall. I had been gone a year from the Vasilisa and Adam, but it had passed so quickly that I was barely aware of the passage of time. But one day, a message from the Queen arrived. Aduthuma and I were summoned back to the Scythian camp. There was to be another great hunt.
Nothing is untrue, nothing don't matter. It's all notions of our emotions, of everything we are and what we belong to, how we reach our destination. Shadows fading light. We're caught in burning fire, almost falling from the sky. And the sun may tear the wings of us like Icarus. We fly, fly with courage and bravado, fly with passion in our hearts, and realizing the power of love will guide us safe to shore. Caught in burning fire. Calling you a friend, a lover, a fighter. May we never be like strangers, never be afraid in fear of each other. May we keep all we uncover. We're caught in burning fire, almost falling from the sky. And the sun may tear the wings of us like Icarus. We fly, fly with courage and bravado, fly with passion in our hearts, and realizing the power of love will guide us safe to shore. Caught in burning.
Music for Chapter 21. Ed Records, Legends. Eunice ex disciples meus. Epidemic Sound, Silver Maple. Epidemic Sound, Mystic Mountain. Epidemic Sound, Life of the Eagle by Etienne Roussel. Ed Records, Save the World. Epidemic Sound by Johannes Borloff. Dan Phipson, All Around Us. Epidemic Sound, The Portal by Bonnie Grace. Ben Sound, Epic. Epidemic Sound, Godsend by Johannes Barloff. Ethos by Johannes Barloff. Kyrio Alençon by Silver Maple. Army of Angels by Edgar Hopp. Like Icarius We Fly by Ethan Martin. Archangel Chronicles. Copyright 2023 by Raymond, all rights reserved.
Safe to shore.